choice he made today would indeed change his life forever. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Keanu had always been a man who thrived on the idea of control. His career, his public image, his every move, meticulously planned. But over the last few months, life had thrown curveballs he couldn't predict, couldn't plan for. He'd lost his spark, the drive that had once made him one of the most beloved figures in Hollywood. It was as if his soul had been taken from him, piece by piece, with every failed project, every quiet night of questioning his place in the world. Today was no different. His car, a symbol of the life he had built, had a flat tire in the middle of nowhere. Keanu stood by the side of the road staring at the wheel, knowing that the moment was symbolic in more ways than one. The tire, like him, was worn out, helpless. His hands shook as he tried to loosen the bolts, frustration bubbling up from deep inside. Just when he thought things couldn't get worse, a shadow appeared on the horizon. A man walking towards him from the distance. Keanu had not noticed him at first, the stranger blending in with the world around him. As the man drew closer, Keanu looked up. He was a middle-aged figure with a weathered face, yet there was a calmness about him that Keanu immediately sensed. "You need a hand?" the man asked, his voice quiet but carrying an unmistakable warmth. Keanu blinked, confused. Here, in the middle of nowhere, was a stranger willing to help. A moment of kindness, yet somehow it felt different. The man's gaze lingered on Keanu as though he understood something deeper, something Keanu hadn't yet come to terms with. "Yeah," Keanu said, his voice rough, more out of surprise than anything. He stepped aside, letting the stranger take over. The man effortlessly went to work, fixing the tire with a precision that Keanu couldn't help but admire. As the man finished, he stood up, wiping his hands on his jacket. "You'll be okay," he said, his eyes meeting Keanu's, as if there was something unsaid between them. Without another word, the stranger turned and walked away, disappearing into the distance just as quickly as he had appeared. Keanu stood there for a long moment, staring after the man. Something about him, something in the way he looked at Keanu, like he saw the part of him that was lost, that no one else had seen in a long time. It was strange, but Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter wasn't just random. The next day, as he sat in his car, the weight of the previous day's events hung heavy on him. He reached into the glove compartment, and there it was, an envelope, no return address, just his name written in bold letters. He opened it, and inside was only a single sentence. "The choice you make today will define the rest of your life." Keanu's breath caught in his throat. Who had sent this? Was it the stranger? And more importantly, what was the choice he had to make? The question gnawed at him all day. He tried to push it aside, but no matter how much he tried, he couldn't escape the feeling that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't even begin to understand. The letter stayed with Keanu all night, haunting him like a shadow that wouldn't let go. The simple words, "The choice you make today will define the rest of your life," felt heavier with each passing hour. Who would send him such a cryptic message? And why now? His mind was racing. The strange encounter with the man yesterday couldn't be just a coincidence, could it? Keanu had always believed in fate, but this felt different. The next morning, Keanu woke up with a sense of urgency he couldn't shake off. He felt restless, like there was something waiting for him outside, something important. But what? As he sat at the kitchen table, the weight of the letter still on his chest, his phone rang. It was his agent calling about a new project that had come his way. "Keanu, there's an opportunity, a big one," the agent said. "But you need to decide fast. It's a risky one, something that could either make or break your career." Keanu listened, his thoughts briefly distracted. But in the back of his mind, the letter and the stranger's words echoed. This could be the moment that changed everything for him. He felt like the universe had thrown him a lifeline, but it was up to him to grab it. But that nagging feeling, the one that had been there since the day before, didn't go away. What if the choice he had to make wasn't just about the project? What if it was something deeper, something personal, something that would force him to confront the darkness inside himself that he had been avoiding for so long? "Keanu," his agent's voice broke through his thoughts. "Are you with me?" "Yeah," Keanu said, shaking himself back to reality. "I'll think about it. I need a little time." After the call, Keanu stood in his kitchen, staring out the window at the world that felt so distant, so disconnected from him. The decision wasn't just about the project, it was about everything. The choices he had made, the people he had hurt, and the path he had been walking. Was it time to change? Was it time to step off the path he had been on for years and take a risk, even if it meant losing everything? The more he thought about it, the more it became clear this choice wasn't just about his career, it was about redemption. He grabbed his keys and walked out the door, feeling the weight of the decision press down on him like never before. Keanu drove aimlessly, his mind still tangled in the web of uncertainty. The weight of the letter, his career, and the choices ahead of him pulled at him like invisible threads. He couldn't focus on anything for too long. Not the road in front of him. Not the music playing softly in the background. Everything felt disconnected. He needed clarity. It was then that he saw him, the stranger, the same man who had helped him with the tire. He was walking down the side of the road as though he had appeared out of nowhere. Keanu's heart skipped a beat. He had to stop. He had to know why this man kept haunting his thoughts. Was this the sign he'd been waiting for? He slammed on the brakes and pulled over, the tires screeching against the asphalt. The man turned, a faint look of recognition in his eyes, though he didn't show any surprise. It was as if he had been expecting this. "Hey!" Keanu called out as he stepped out of the car, his voice a little shaky. "I need to talk to you." The stranger looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "I thought you might—" "Why did you help me yesterday?" Keanu asked, his voice a mix of frustration and confusion. "Who are you?" The man studied him for a moment, his gaze calm but piercing, as if he could see through Keanu's questions, through his walls. "I helped you because you needed it," the stranger replied simply. "But the question isn't why I helped you. It's why you needed help." Keanu was taken aback. He had expected some cryptic response, but not like this. "What does that mean?" The stranger's eyes softened, but there was an intensity in them that made Keanu feel like he was being pulled into something bigger than himself. "You've been lost, Keanu. You've been searching for answers and you don't even know it. But I'm not the one who will give them to you. You have to find them yourself." The words hit him hard. The stranger wasn't just offering help. He was pushing Keanu to face something deep inside of him. Something he wasn't ready to confront. "Why me?" Keanu asked quietly, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on him. "Why now?" The stranger took a step closer, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Because you're at a crossroads, and the path you choose will either lead you to healing or further into despair. I'm just here to remind you that the power has always been in your hands." Keanu stared at him, a mix of confusion and understanding swirling inside him. He wanted answers, wanted to know who this man was, why he seemed to know so much about him. But instead the stranger turned and started walking away again. "You'll understand soon enough," the man said over his shoulder. "And remember, the choice you make today will define the rest of your life." Keanu stood there, his breath caught in his chest, as the man disappeared into the distance once again. But this time the feeling was different. The uncertainty that had been gnawing at him was now replaced with something else, a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this stranger wasn't just some random passerby. Maybe he was the key to everything Keanu had been searching for. He had to find out, and that meant making the choice, the one that would change his life forever. The encounter with the stranger lingered in Keanu's mind for hours, swirling through his thoughts like an uninvited guest. He couldn't shake the feeling that the man was more than just a random figure in his life. There was something about him, something familiar yet elusive, that made Keanu believe that their paths had crossed for a reason. He drove back to his apartment, his mind heavy with the stranger's words, the choice, the decision. It kept repeating in his head like a drumbeat, demanding attention. Keanu had been at crossroads before in his life, but this time it felt different. This wasn't about the usual career decisions or the typical next steps in his life. No, this time it was about his soul, about finding his way back to who he truly was, beyond the fame, beyond the expectations, and beyond the public persona that he had carefully crafted over the years. As he pulled into the parking lot of his building, he noticed something strange. A small crowd had gathered near the entrance. People were standing around, looking down at something. Curiosity piqued, Keanu stepped out of the car and walked toward the crowd, hoping it wasn't another paparazzi frenzy. But as he got closer, he saw what everyone was looking at: a man lying on the ground. His clothes were ragged, and his face was covered in dirt. He was homeless, no doubt about it, but it was the look in his eyes that stopped Keanu in his tracks. There was something familiar about him, a deep sadness that mirrored Keanu's own. The crowd murmured, unsure of what to do. Keanu's heart clenched as he stepped forward. He kneeled down beside the man, his instincts kicking in. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft but steady. The man's eyes fluttered open, and for a brief moment he stared up at Keanu with a knowing look. "You?" the man rasped, his voice barely a whisper. "You don't remember me, do you?" Keanu's chest tightened. He had no idea who this man was, but the look in his eyes, the pain, the resignation, struck a chord deep within him. The man's words felt like a weight Keanu couldn't escape. Something told him that this moment, this encounter, was not a coincidence. "No," Keanu said, shaking his head. "I'm sorry. I don't—" The man's eyes softened. "I'm the one who saved you once. Long before all this," he said, his voice gaining strength. "Before the fame, before the lights, I was the one who gave you the push you needed. But you forgot. You left it all behind." Keanu's heart skipped a beat. Saved him? Who was this man? How did he know so much about his past? But before Keanu could ask more, the man's eyes closed again, his breathing shallow. Someone in the crowd called for an ambulance, but Keanu couldn't bring himself to leave. There was something more here, something pulling him in, a sense of unfinished business between them. As the paramedics arrived and took the man away, Keanu stood there, stunned. He couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was a sign, a part of the puzzle that he hadn't yet solved. Was this the choice? Was helping this man somehow tied to the decision he had to make? He couldn't stop thinking about the stranger's words. "The choice you make today will define the rest of your life." Keanu knew what he had to do. He had to find out who this man was, why their paths had crossed again, and what it all meant. It was the only way he could make sense of the choice ahead of him. The days following the encounter with the homeless man felt like a blur. Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change forever. His mind kept drifting back to that moment, when the man had called him out, the familiarity in his eyes, the way he had spoken about saving Keanu before. Who was he? Why had he come back into Keanu's life now? Keanu couldn't rest. He couldn't focus on anything. The weight of it all, the decision he had to make, the strange meeting with the man, the cryptic letter, and the ever-present shadow of the stranger's words was suffocating. He needed answers. Keanu hired a private investigator. It felt extreme, but something deep inside him told him that this was no ordinary encounter. There was a connection here, something that stretched beyond the fleeting moments of kindness between strangers. This man had known Keanu's past, a past that Keanu had buried so deep that even he had forgotten about it. Days passed, and the investigator came back with unsettling news. The man was someone Keanu had once known, a mentor of sorts. Years ago, long before the fame, Keanu had been struggling. He was lost in the grind of Hollywood, unsure of his place in the world. The mentor had been a homeless man at the time, someone who had helped him when he was down, when the world had felt too heavy to carry. He had given Keanu words of wisdom, encouragement, and strength, reminding him of the person he was before the fame took over. But Keanu had forgotten him. He had moved on, and over the years the memories of that time faded into the background. Until now. The investigator handed Keanu an old photograph. It was a picture of the two men together, taken in a small park. The homeless man had been sitting on a bench, and Keanu had been standing beside him, a young man with wide eyes and a hopeful expression. The photo was a reminder of a part of Keanu's life he had long since left behind. As Keanu stared at the picture, a strange mix of guilt and realization washed over him. This man, this stranger, had been a part of his past, someone who had helped him when he had nothing, and now, it seemed, he had come back to remind Keanu of who he really was. But why? What did he want from Keanu now? Was he trying to teach him something? Or was it fate pulling them together again, pushing Keanu to face the choices he had been avoiding? The choice that had seemed so abstract just days ago now felt like a heavy burden on his chest. He could feel it, deep in his bones. The decision was coming, and it was more than just about his career. It was about redemption. It was about reclaiming the person he had been before fame and success took over. It was about making things right. Keanu stood up and walked to the door. He knew what he had to do. He couldn't run from this any longer. He had to find the man again and confront the truth. Only then could he move forward. Only then could he make the choice that would define the rest of his life. Keanu drove with purpose now, the weight of the decision no longer a burden but a call to action. He knew where to find the man. The same park he had once crossed paths with him years ago. It was a place that felt more like home than anywhere else, despite the years that had passed. As he pulled into the park's parking lot, a sense of calm settled over him. This wasn't about fame. This wasn't about the world that had made him a star. This was about something deeper, something that had always been within him. He needed to reconnect with the man who had once reminded him of who he truly was, the man who had taught him lessons he had long forgotten. Keanu stepped out of the car and walked toward the familiar bench, his heart beating a little faster with each step. He spotted the man sitting there, just as he had all those years ago. This time, the man didn't look up, but Keanu knew he was waiting for him. "I've been looking for you," Keanu said softly as he approached, his voice carrying the weight of everything he had been holding inside. The man slowly looked up, his eyes still carrying that same quiet wisdom. "I know," he replied simply, his voice calm but knowing. Keanu sat beside him, the silence between them thick with meaning. For a moment, Keanu didn't know what to say. The words felt small, inadequate. But then, the stranger broke the silence. "You came because you needed to," he said, his voice low. "But more importantly, you came because you wanted to change." Keanu nodded slowly. "I don't know what's happening to me," he admitted, his voice shaking slightly, "but I do know that everything feels wrong. I've spent years chasing something that doesn't matter. I've forgotten who I am." The stranger's eyes softened, but there was a hard edge to his words. "That's the thing with fame, Keanu. It makes you forget. It blinds you to what really matters. But you can't find your way back until you're willing to face it. The good, the bad, the mistakes, and the choices you've avoided. You've been running from yourself, but now is your chance to stop." Keanu felt a wave of emotion wash over him. This was it. This was the moment that would define everything. The man wasn't just a stranger. He was a reflection of the person Keanu used to be. A reminder of the person he could be again. "Do I deserve a second chance?" Keanu asked quietly, his voice barely a whisper. The stranger smiled, a small but knowing smile. "It's not about deserving, Keanu. It's about choosing. It's about taking responsibility for who you are and what you want your life to be. This is your chance to make things right." Keanu took a deep breath, the weight of his past and his future pressing against him. He looked at the man beside him, the one who had quietly guided him back to this moment. "I choose to face it," Keanu said, his voice filled with resolve. "I choose to make things right." The stranger nodded, as if he had been waiting for that answer all along. "Then you've made the right choice. You'll see that everything you've been searching for has always been inside of you." Keanu stood up, the decision clear in his heart. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be struggles, doubts, and challenges, but now he knew that he wasn't alone. The man had shown him the way back to himself. The choice was his, and he would no longer run from it. As Keanu walked away, he glanced back once more at the stranger, but this time the man was gone, vanished like a shadow in the distance. Keanu felt no sadness, only peace. He had his answer, and he was ready to move forward. He had chosen redemption, and in doing so he had chosen to live a life that was truly his. The choice he made today would indeed change his life forever.